They taught their officers to hunt in the shadows of forgotten neighborhoods, where justice was measured in quotas and human dignity could be bought for the price of a promotion. Captain Warren called it proactive policing. The streets called it persecution. 2,000 arrests in 3 years, each one feeding a machine that turned police badges into profit and innocence into a luxury the poor couldn't afford. Then they made their fatal mistake. They arrested Monica Lewis. On paper, she was everything they looked for. A single black mother, working double shifts, living on the edges of their target zones. They expected her to break like the others, to plead guilty to a crime she didn't commit, to become another silent victory for their quotas. What they didn't count on was her receipt, or her resolve, or the way a mother's love, when pushed against injustice, can burn hotter than any corrupt system. Now, as she stands in their precinct, surrounded by the architects of oppression, Monica Lewis is about to teach them a lesson that will echo through police departments for years to come. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the badge. It's the one with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Monica Lewis massaged her aching feet as she pulled into the Walker's grocery store parking lot. The clock on her dashboard blinked 10:47 p.m., another exhausting double shift at Jerry's Diner done, but her day wasn't over yet. Her children needed food for the week, and this was her only chance to shop before tomorrow's shift at the cleaning service. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Monica grabbed a shopping cart, its wheels squeaking with each push. Her diner uniform still smelled of grease and coffee, but changing clothes would have meant getting home even later. The store was nearly empty, save for a few other late-night shoppers and the bored-looking teenage cashier scrolling through his phone. She pulled out a crumpled shopping list from her coat pocket, smiling despite her exhaustion at her daughter. Lily's careful handwriting. Bread, eggs, milk was written in wobbly letters with "chocolate milk please" added at the bottom, surrounded by little hearts. 10-year-old Lily and her brother Marcus, 12, had been so understanding lately about their mother's long hours, never complaining when dinner was late or when they had to spend evenings with elderly Mrs. Green from next door. Got to make this quick, Monica muttered, heading for the produce section. She'd gotten efficient at these late-night shopping runs, knowing exactly which aisles to hit and which brands offered the best value. Store-brand cereals instead of the fancy boxes her kids saw on TV. The slightly bruised apples sold at a discount. Day-old bread that would still make perfectly good sandwiches. Every penny counted since their father had walked out 2 years ago, leaving Monica to shoulder every bill, every responsibility, every dream and worry about their children's future. Across town, Officer James Hayes sat in his patrol car, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. 6 months on the force, and he still felt the same surge of pride every time he put on his uniform. The badge gleamed on his chest, polished each morning with careful attention. His colleagues might mock his eagerness, but Hayes had ambitions. He wasn't going to spend his career walking a beat or responding to domestic disturbances. He had his sights set on detective, maybe even captain someday. The radio crackled, breaking through his thoughts. Unit 247, this is Captain Warren. Hayes immediately sat up straighter. Unit 247 here, go ahead, Captain. Status report on your patrol of the target zones? Warren's voice carried an edge of impatience. Just finished Sector 3, sir. Moving to Sector 4 now. Pick up the pace, Hayes. You know we're behind on our monthly quotas. I need officers who understand what it takes to maintain law and order in this city. Don't make me regret giving you this beat. Hayes swallowed hard, remembering Warren's earlier orientation about which neighborhoods needed extra attention. The captain had been very clear about the importance of meeting certain metrics, particularly in the predominantly minority communities, that somehow always ended up with the highest arrest rates. Understood, sir. I won't let you down. Hayes pulled into the Walker's grocery parking lot, part of his designated patrol route. The store's security guard, Tom Bradley, was already walking toward his car. Hayes recognized him from the morning. Briefings, a wannabe cop who'd failed the academy 3 times, but loved throwing his weight around in a security uniform. Bradley leaned down to Hayes' window, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "Glad you're here, officer. Got a suspicious one inside. Black female. Been wandering the aisles for a while. Probably stuffing merchandise in her coat." Hayes felt his pulse quicken. This could be his chance to show Warren he understood how things worked in this precinct. "Thanks for the heads up. Description? Dark blue coat, jeans. Looks like some kind of waitress uniform underneath. Been watching her on the cameras. Something ain't right about how she's moving through the store." Inside, Monica was at the checkout counter, carefully counting out bills from her worn wallet. Each item had been selected with precision, staying within her tight budget while ensuring her children would have enough to eat for the week. The teenage cashier barely looked at her as he scanned the items, more interested in his phone than the late-night customer. "That'll be $73.42, he mumbled. Monica counted out the exact amount, tucking the receipt safely in her pocket. Her grandmother had taught her long ago to always keep receipts, especially when shopping. Late at night. "Better safe than sorry," she'd said. And Monica had learned the wisdom of those words over years of being followed in stores, questioned about purchases, treated with suspicion for simply trying to feed her family. The automatic doors whooshed open as Monica stepped into the cold night air, grocery bags balanced in both hands. Her mind was already racing ahead to home. Marcus needed help with his math homework, and Lily had been fighting a cold. Maybe she could squeeze in a bedtime story if they were still awake. "Ma'am, stop right there!" The sharp command froze Monica in place. She turned to find Officer Hayes approaching, his hand resting deliberately on his holster. Her heart began to pound, but she forced herself to remain calm, remembering every warning her mother had given her about these situations. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady and polite. "Put those bags down slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." Hayes moved closer, his rookie nervousness masked by aggressive authority. "We've had reports of shoplifting." Monica carefully set down her groceries, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, I have my receipt right here in my pocket. I paid for everything." "Don't reach," Hayes barked, causing her to flinch. "Keep those hands up." "Please," Monica's voice cracked slightly. "The receipt is right here. I didn't do anything wrong, but—" Hayes was already calling for backup. His earlier uncertainty transformed into righteous certainty. This was proper policing, he told himself. This was maintaining order in the target zones, just like Warren wanted. "Mama! Mama!" The desperate cries shattered the night air. Monica's heart dropped as she saw Marcus and Lily running across the parking lot, Mrs. Green hurrying behind them as fast as her arthritis would allow. The elderly woman had been watching the kids in her apartment just around the corner, waiting for Monica to return with groceries. "Stay back!" Hayes shouted at the approaching children, his hand tightening on his holster. Lily burst into tears at his tone, while Marcus froze in place, his young face contorted with confusion and fear. "Please," Monica begged, her composed facade crumbling as she watched terror overtake her children's faces. "They're my babies. Just let me explain. Stop resisting." Hayes grabbed her arm, spinning her around roughly. The grocery bags toppled as he pushed her against his patrol car, sending oranges and apples rolling across the dark asphalt. The chocolate milk carton burst, creating a brown puddle that reflected the store's harsh lighting. "I'm not resisting," Monica gasped as handcuffs clicked around her wrists, cold metal biting into her skin. "The receipt is in my right pocket. Please just look." Mrs. Green had reached the children now, pulling them close as they sobbed. Her voice shook with outrage as she addressed Hayes. "Officer, this is absolutely ridiculous. I've known Monica. For years, she's a hard-working mother who—" "Step back, ma'am," Hayes ordered, his face flushed with adrenaline, and something that might have been shame if he'd let himself feel it. "This is a police matter." A small crowd had begun to gather in the parking lot. Several people had their phones out, recording the scene. A young woman in scrubs, presumably just off her own late shift, stepped forward with anger in her voice. "She has her receipt. I was right behind her in line. I saw her pay for everything." "Anyone interfering will be arrested for obstruction," Hayes announced, maintaining his grip on Monica's arm. She had stopped struggling. Her body slumped in. Defeat as she watched a week's worth of carefully budgeted groceries scattered across the ground. The bread was crushed, eggs broken, precious dollars wasted while her children screamed. "Mama, please." Lily's voice had grown hoarse from crying. "Please don't take my mama." Mrs. Green held both children tightly, her own eyes brimming with tears of helpless anger. Marcus stood rigid in her embrace, his 12-year-old mind struggling to process this violation of everything he'd been taught about justice and fairness. Monica tried to turn her head, desperate to offer some comfort to her children. "Mrs. Green, please take them home. It's going to be okay. Marcus, baby, take care of your sister. I'll be—" "Face forward." Hayes pushed her head down as he opened the back door of his patrol car. The last thing Monica saw before the door slammed was Lily collapsing in Mrs. Green's arms, her small body racked with sobs. The drive to the precinct passed in a blur of sirens and radio static. Monica sat perfectly still in the back seat, her hands growing numb from the tight handcuffs. Her mind raced with fears. Who would get the kids ready for school tomorrow? What would her boss at Jerry's say when she didn't show up for the morning shift? How could she possibly afford a lawyer on her salary? The precinct buzzed with harsh fluorescent activity, despite the late hour. Hayes marched Monica through a gauntlet of curious eyes and whispered comments. The booking process stripped away, her dignity piece by piece, fingerprints pressed into cold ink, the harsh flash of the mugshot camera, her belongings cataloged and sealed in a plastic bag. "Empty your pockets," ordered a tired-looking officer with sergeant's stripes. Monica could only watch helplessly as they pulled out the crumpled receipt, the proof of her innocence that had gone unexamined in the parking lot. "Please," she tried one more time, her voice barely above a whisper. "The receipt shows I paid for everything." "Save it for your lawyer." The sergeant cut her off, adding the receipt to the bag of belongings without a glance. The holding cell felt like a tomb of hope, the metal door clanging shut with terrible finality. Monica sank onto the hard bench, drawing her knees up to her chest as she tried to ward off the bone-deep chill. Around her, other women sat in various states of despair, some angry, some weeping, some staring into space with vacant eyes. In the bullpen, Hayes typed his report with energetic efficiency, the words flowing easily as he constructed the official narrative. Subject displayed suspicious behavior, made furtive movements when approached, resisted lawful commands. This was what Captain Warren wanted, after all. This was how you proved yourself worthy of advancement. Excellent work. Tonight, Hayes, Warren's voice made him look up from his computer screen. The captain stood beside his desk, a satisfied smile on his face. This is exactly the kind of proactive policing we need in the target zones. Keep this up, and you'll have a bright future in this department. "Thank you, sir," Hayes beamed, pushing away the memory of children's screams and scattered groceries. "Just doing my job." "That's what I like to hear." Warren clapped him on the shoulder. "Law and order. That's what keeps this city running. We have quotas to meet, metrics to maintain. Some bleeding hearts might not understand that, but you do." As Warren walked away, Hayes turned back to his report with renewed determination. This was his path forward, his chance to prove himself worthy of greater things. If some people had to suffer for the greater good, well, that was just how the system worked. In her cold cell, Monica pressed her forehead against her knees and finally allowed her tears to fall. She thought of her children, probably still awake, and terrified in Mrs. Green's apartment. She thought of her jobs, her carefully balanced budget, the life she'd worked so hard to build. One moment, one officer's decision, and everything was crumbling. But beneath her fear and despair, something else was taking root. Determination. She knew she was innocent. She knew this wasn't right. Somehow she would fight this. Somehow, she would make them see the truth. Her children needed her to be strong, to show them that justice was worth fighting for, even when the system seemed stacked against them. Outside the precinct, the night grew colder. The scattered groceries in the Walker's parking lot were eventually cleaned up by the night staff, the spilled milk washed away, the crushed bread and broken eggs thrown in the dumpster. Mrs. Green sat in her apartment, holding Monica's exhausted children as they finally fell into troubled sleep, whispering prayers for justice into the darkness. In his patrol car, Officer Hayes began his next loop through the target zones, his radio crackling with calls, his freshly pressed uniform still perfect, his conscience slowly hardening into the shape his superiors demanded. The night was still young, and there were quotas to meet, arrests to make, order to maintain. Monica closed her eyes in her cell, trying to find a comfortable position on the hard bench. The walls seemed to press in around her, but she refused to let them crush her spirit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining to her bosses, finding a lawyer, reassuring her children. But for now, she held on to her faith that somewhere, somehow, someone would help her fight back against the machine that had so carelessly torn her world apart. Hours crawled by in the holding cell. The fluorescent lights never dimmed, making sleep impossible. Monica thought about Lily's handwriting on the shopping list, about Marcus's face twisted in helpless anger, about Mrs. Green's promises to take care of them. She thought about the receipt in the property bag, such a small piece of paper to carry the weight of her innocence. She thought about Officer Hayes and wondered if he would sleep well tonight, if the sound of her children's screams would haunt his dreams as they now haunted her waking moments. Morning light filtered through the precinct's grimy windows as Monica was finally released, her belongings returned in a plastic bag. The local news vans were already gathering outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like hungry birds. Her heart sank when she saw her mugshot plastered across their screens. The words, "Local mother arrested for theft," scrolling. Beneath, Mrs. Green waited in the lobby, her weathered face tight with worry. "The children are at school," she said, pulling Monica into a fierce hug. "I made sure they ate breakfast, but they barely slept." "Oh, Monica, this isn't right." Monica's fingers trembled as she checked her phone. 27 missed calls. Her bosses, her children's school, numbers she didn't recognize. One voicemail from Jerry's diner stood out. "Given your situation, we'll need to find someone more reliable." Outside, reporters swarmed like locusts. "Mrs. Lewis, any comment on your arrest? Sources say you have a history of shoplifting. Care." "To respond? That's a lie." Monica's voice cracked with exhaustion and anger. "I've never stolen anything in my life." Mrs. Green guided her through the media gauntlet to her ancient Buick. As they drove away, Monica saw the headline on the local news website, "Repeat offender caught in grocery store heist." The photo they'd chosen made her look hardened, dangerous. Nothing like the exhausted mother she'd seen in the mirror that morning. "They're saying I've done this before," Monica whispered, her hands clenching into fists. "They're making me look like a criminal." "We won't let them get away with this," Mrs. Green declared, her arthritic hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "My Harold, God rest his soul, always said that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes, but truth catches up eventually." Back at her apartment, Monica found a termination notice from the cleaning service slipped under her door. 2 jobs lost in less than 12 hours. The rent was due in 10 days, and her savings wouldn't cover it. She sank onto her worn couch, overwhelmed by the speed with which her life was unraveling. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw what happened at Walker's. Have video. DM me. Justice Watcher." More messages followed as the video of her arrest spread across social media. Some offered support, others spewed hatred, but one caught her eye, a local activist named Rachel Martinez. "This isn't an isolated incident. Captain Warren's precinct has a pattern. Call me." The next morning, a small crowd gathered outside the precinct. Signs bobbed in the morning air. "Justice for Monica. Stop police quotas. Black Lives Matter." Rachel stood at the center, her megaphone amplifying years of community frustration. "How many more innocent people will be arrested to meet quotas?" she demanded. "How many more families torn apart?" Inside the precinct, Officer Hayes watched the protesters through Venetian blinds. His report sat open on his computer, the official narrative feeling hollow in the light of day. The video of the arrest had gone viral, and the comments were brutal. His own sister had called, her voice thick with disappointment. "Jimmy, what were you thinking? Don't let it get to you." Captain Warren's voice made him jump. Social media warriors don't understand what it takes to keep order. Speaking of which, the DA's office called. They're offering your perp a deal. Plead guilty to a misdemeanor. Time served. Hayes nodded mechanically, but something didn't sit right. The receipt had been in her pocket, just like she'd said. He'd seen it in booking, date-stamped, itemized. Why were they pushing for a plea? The courthouse stood like a stone guardian in the heart of downtown, its marble steps well worn by the feet of those seeking justice. Monica climbed them slowly, Mrs. Green at her side. The prosecutor's office had summoned her for a meeting, and she couldn't afford to ignore the call. Assistant District Attorney William Sheffield sat behind a massive desk, his suit as crisp as his tone. "Mrs. Lewis, let's be practical. You're a single mother with no savings and no lawyer. We're offering you a way out. Plead guilty to misdemeanor theft, and this all goes away. Time served, minimal fine." "I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do," Monica replied, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "I have the receipt. I paid for everything." Sheffield's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Receipts can be faked. Officer Hayes' report paints a very different picture. Think about your children, Mrs. Lewis. Do you really want to risk jail time?" "I am thinking about my children." Monica stood, her hands steady now. "I'm thinking about what kind of example I'd be setting if I admitted to a crime I didn't commit just because you're trying to scare me." As they left the courthouse, a tall black man in an impeccable suit approached them. "Mrs. Lewis? I'm Judge Nathaniel Carter. I couldn't help overhearing. Are you being pressured to take a plea?" Monica hesitated, but Mrs. Green spoke up. "They're trying to railroad her, Your Honor. She's innocent. There's video proof, witnesses, even the receipt. But they're threatening her with jail if she doesn't plead guilty." Judge Carter's expression darkened. "I know this game all too well. The system counts on people being too scared or too poor to fight back." He handed Monica a business card. "Call Jason Bell. Tell him I sent you. He's a civil rights attorney who takes on cases like yours pro bono." Jason Bell's office was a far cry from the prosecutor's mahogany palace. Papers covered every surface, and protest posters lined the walls. The lawyer himself was younger than Monica expected, with keen eyes and barely contained energy. "Judge Carter told me about your case," he said, gesturing for Monica and Mrs. Green to sit. "I've been tracking Warren's precinct for months. They have a pattern of targeting minority neighborhoods, enforcing illegal arrest quotas. Your case might be exactly what we need to expose it." "I just want my life back," Monica admitted. "I lost both my jobs, my kids are traumatized, and the media's painting me as some kind of career criminal." "We'll get your life back," Jason promised, "and maybe help others avoid the same fate. But I need you to be strong. Warren and his cronies won't go down without a fight." Back at the precinct, Hayes sat through the daily briefing, trying to ignore the growing knot in his stomach. Warren was praising the department's proactive policing strategies, boasting about increased arrest numbers. The other officers nodded along, but Hayes noticed Officer Maria Rivera staring at her hands, her face troubled. After the meeting, Hayes found himself studying arrest reports from the past 6 months. The pattern was undeniable. Predominantly minority neighborhoods, similar charges, same outcome. Most defendants took plea deals, their lives forever marked by convictions they couldn't afford to fight. That evening, Jason filed a motion requesting all arrest records from Warren's precinct. The response was swift and aggressive. The department's lawyers claimed confidentiality, citing ongoing investigations and officer safety. "They're hiding something," Jason told Monica during their next meeting. "But we're not alone in this fight anymore." He showed her his phone. Dozens of messages from other victims of similar arrests. A black teenager arrested for suspicious behavior while walking home from basketball practice. A Hispanic mother charged with trespassing at her own apartment complex. an elderly Asian man accused of stealing from his own store. Rachel's activist. Network had been documenting these cases for years, building a database of Warren's targets. Now, with Monica's case gaining attention, more victims were coming forward. Judge Carter watched the case files pile up on his desk, each one a story of lives disrupted by quotas and prejudice. He'd seen this pattern before, watched too many. Innocent people plead guilty because they couldn't afford justice. Not this time. The motion for discovery is granted, he announced in a packed courtroom. The department will provide all requested records within 7 days. Warren's face turned purple with rage. Hayes, sitting in the back of the courtroom, felt something shift inside him. The captain's anger wasn't about protecting officers or maintaining order. It was about protecting a corrupt system that profited from human misery. That night, Hayes couldn't sleep. The faces of Monica's children haunted him, their terror, their tears, their lost innocence. He thought about his own childhood dreams of being a cop, of protecting people and serving justice. When had those dreams twisted into this nightmare of quotas and false arrests? His phone buzzed, a message from Officer Rivera. "We need to talk, not at the precinct. It's about Warren's quotas." Monica tucked her children into bed, their small apartment now feeling both safer and more fragile. Lily still had nightmares about the arrest, and Marcus had grown quiet, watchful. But tonight, for the first time since that terrible night, Lily had smiled at dinner. "Mama," she whispered as Monica kissed her forehead. "Are the bad policemen going to come back?" "No, baby," Monica promised, her heart aching. "And they weren't all bad, just confused. Sometimes people do wrong things because they're scared or because someone tells them they have to. But there are good people helping us now, fighting, to make things right." "Like Mr. Bell?" Marcus asked from his bed. "And Judge Carter?" "Yes, like them, and like Mrs. Green, and Rachel, and all the protesters. Sometimes it takes a whole community to fix something that's broken." As her children drifted off to sleep, Monica checked her phone. Jason had texted. More victims had come forward, each story adding to the pattern of abuse. The media narrative was shifting, questions being asked about Warren's methods, about quotas, about systemic racism in law enforcement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, another court hearing, more media attention, the constant struggle to find new work while fighting for justice. But tonight, watching her children sleep peacefully, Monica felt something she hadn't experienced since the night of her arrest. Hope. In his apartment across town, Hayes stared at his polished badge, wondering when it had become a symbol of oppression rather than protection. His phone screen glowed with Officer Rivera's message, offering a chance at redemption. At doing what? Was right instead of what was ordered. The web of corruption that had ensnared Monica Lewis was beginning to unravel, its threads pulled loose by the combined efforts of a determined mother, a principled judge, a passionate lawyer, and a community that refused to remain silent. But Warren's power ran deep, and the fight for justice was far from over. Outside the precinct, the protest signs had multiplied, their messages echoing through the streets. No more quotas. Justice for all. The system must change. Rachel led the growing crowd in chants that reached through the precinct walls, demanding accountability, demanding change. Monica's story had become a rallying cry, a spotlight illuminating the dark corners of a broken system. But as she lay in bed, that night her children safely asleep in the next room, she knew that the hardest battles still lay ahead. Warren wouldn't surrender his power easily, and the corrupt web he'd woven through the department would resist being torn apart. Yet something had shifted in the city's consciousness. More voices were joining the chorus for change, more evidence emerging of Warren's corrupt practices. The truth was finally catching up, and its footsteps echoed like thunder through the halls of power. Jason Bell sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by towers of case files and cold coffee cups. His computer screen displayed an email from Walker's grocery store. "We regret to inform you that the surveillance footage from the night in question has been accidentally deleted during routine system maintenance." Accidentally deleted my foot, he muttered, reaching for his phone to call Monica. Before he could dial, a text message appeared from an unknown number. North parking lot. Midnight. About Warren's quotas. Come alone. The night air carried a chill as Jason waited in his car, engine off, watching shadows play across the empty parking lot. A figure emerged from the darkness. Officer Maria Rivera, still in uniform, her shoulders tense with nervous energy. Thanks for coming, she said, sliding into the passenger seat. I can't be seen talking to you. Warren has eyes everywhere. Tell me about the quotas, Jason replied, his recorder discreetly running. Rivera's hands twisted in her lap. It started small, suggestions about which neighborhoods needed extra attention. Then came the bonuses, cash incentives for officers who met certain performance metrics. Warren called it productivity enhancement. How many innocent people were arrested? Hundreds, maybe thousands. Most took plea deals because they couldn't afford to fight. Rivera pulled out a flash drive. This is a copy of Warren's ledger. He tracks everything: arrest numbers, racial, demographics, bonus payments. He's careful never to put it on official servers. Back at his office, Jason pored over the ledger's contents. The numbers told a damning story. Systematic targeting of minority neighborhoods, financial rewards for aggressive officers, careers made and broken based on arrest quotas. Meanwhile, Monica faced her own battles. Marcus came home from school, with a split lip, his eyes dark with suppressed rage. Baby, what happened? Monica touched his face gently, her heart breaking at his flinch. Tommy Peters said you're a criminal, Marcus muttered. Said his dad saw it on the news. Said we don't belong here anymore. Lily huddled in the corner of the couch, her homework untouched. The other kids won't play with me at recess, she whispered. They say their parents told them to stay away. Monica pulled both children close, feeling their small bodies tremble, with confusion and hurt. Listen to me, she said firmly. What they're saying isn't true. Sometimes people believe lies because they're scared or because they don't know better. But we know the truth, and we're going to fight for it. That evening, Jason visited Monica's apartment, bringing pizza and the grim news about the surveillance footage. They're trying to bury the evidence, he explained, watching Marcus pick listlessly at his slice. But Officer Rivera came forward. She's given us proof of Warren's quota system. Will it be enough? Monica asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. The strain of unemployment and legal battles had left dark circles under her eyes. We're getting there. Judge Carter ordered the release of arrest records, and my team is analyzing the pattern. Warren's bonuses weren't just unethical, they were illegal. We just need to prove it. A knock at the door made them all freeze. Monica approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. A manila envelope lay on her doormat. No sender in sight. Inside was a handwritten note. Back off or your kids might have more trouble at school. Some accidents can't be prevented. Monica's hands shook as she showed Jason the threat. They're targeting my children now. This ends now, Jason growled, pulling out his phone to call Judge Carter. Across town, Officer Hayes sat in his car, staring at the precinct entrance. His latest arrest quota was due, but Rivera's words haunted him. How many other innocent people had he arrested, their lives destroyed to feed Warren's corrupt machine? His phone buzzed. Another message from Warren. Numbers looking low this month, Hayes. Remember our conversation about career advancement. Hayes thought about Monica's children screaming in the parking lot, about Marcus's split lip that he'd witnessed yesterday while driving past the school, about the ledger he'd seen on Warren's desk matching Rivera's description. At Walker's Grocery, the night manager, David Wilson, locked up with trembling hands. Earlier that day, 2 plainclothes officers had visited, reminding him about the importance of community cooperation. The surveillance footage hadn't been accidentally deleted. He'd erased it himself under their watchful eyes. The guilt ate at him as he drove home. He'd thought being a good citizen meant supporting the police, But what if the police weren't supporting justice? Rachel's activist network had been busy. Her latest blog post connected Warren's arrest patterns to city funding, revealing how quotas generated revenue through fines and plea deals. Comments poured in from other victims, their stories forming a devastating picture of systemic abuse. The whole system is designed to trap people, she explained to her followers in a live stream. They arrest innocent people, pressure them into plea deals, then use those convictions to justify more aggressive policing. It's a cycle of injustice funded by our tax dollars. Jason worked late into the night, linking evidence from Rivera's ledger to official arrest records. A clear pattern emerged. Officers who met quotas received bonuses, while those who questioned the system found themselves assigned to dead-end beats or facing internal investigations. His computer pinged with an email from a former officer who'd worked under Warren. I tried to report the quota system 3 years ago. They buried the complaint and forced me into early retirement. I kept copies of everything. The next morning, Monica walked her children to school, ignoring the whispers and stares from other parents. Marcus walked with his head high, but his hand gripped hers tightly. Lily hummed quietly to herself, a nervous habit she'd developed since the arrest. Remember what I told you, Monica said at the school gates. You have nothing to be ashamed of. We're fighting for the truth. Mrs. Lewis? She turned to find Officer Hayes standing awkwardly nearby, his uniform crisp, but his face troubled. The sight of him made Lily shrink behind her mother. What do you want? Monica asked, stepping between Hayes and her children. Hayes swallowed hard. I need to tell you something. About Warren, about the quotas, about why I really arrested you that night. Before he could continue, a patrol car pulled up sharply. Captain Warren himself stepped out, his face thunderous. Officer Hayes, my office now. Hayes looked at Monica, then at her children, then back at Warren. In that moment, he had to choose between the career he'd dreamed of and the truth he could no longer deny. Meanwhile, Judge Carter received a thick envelope from Jason. As he read through the evidence, the ledger, the witness statements, the pattern of corruption, his jaw tightened. This wasn't just about one wrongful arrest anymore. This was about a system that had betrayed its fundamental purpose. He drafted an order requiring the precinct to preserve all records and communications. Warren might have deleted the store footage, but there would be no more convenient accidents that afternoon. Jason met with Monica to review their strategy. The threat against her children had shaken her, but it had also strengthened her resolve. We're not just fighting for me anymore, she said, showing him pictures other victims had sent. Elderly men humiliated by false arrests, young mothers separated from their children, teenagers whose futures were derailed by coerced plea deals. We're fighting for all of them. As they talked, more evidence arrived. Rachel's network had identified over 200 cases matching Monica's. Minority residents arrested on flimsy pretexts, pressured into pleas, their lives forever altered by Warren's quota system. David Wilson, the night manager, finally broke. His silence, providing a sworn statement about the deleted footage. They said my job would be at risk if I didn't cooperate, he explained. But I can't live with this anymore. I have the original footage backed up on my personal drive. The footage showed exactly what Monica had claimed. A normal shopping trip ended by Hayes' aggressive intervention. More importantly, it showed Warren himself visiting the store hours before the arrest, speaking with security guard Bradley. Officer Rivera continued gathering evidence, taking enormous risks to document Warren's ongoing corruption. She recorded conversations about quotas, photographed internal memos, and compiled lists of officers who'd been rewarded or punished based on their arrest numbers. Late that night, Hayes sat in his apartment, staring at his badge and gun. Warren's threats echoed in his mind, but so did the sound of children crying, of lives being broken for the sake of statistics. His phone held dozens of texts from Warren, each more threatening than the last. The next morning, Monica received another envelope. But this time, when she opened it, she smiled. Inside were statements from other officers in Hayes's precinct, each one detailing Warren's quota system and its devastating impact on the community. Jason added these statements to his growing file. The evidence was overwhelming. A conspiracy of quotas, racism, and greed that had destroyed countless lives. Now they just had to prove it in court. As Monica tucked her children into bed that night, Lily asked a question that broke her heart. "Mama, why do some police officers hurt people instead of helping them?" "It's complicated, baby," Monica answered, carefully. "Sometimes people forget why they chose their jobs. They forget that their power is supposed to help people, not hurt them. But there are good police officers too, ones who remember. And when the bad ones do wrong things, it's up to everyone else to stand up and say no." "Like you're doing?" Marcus asked from his bed. "Like we're all doing," Monica corrected him. "Me, Mr. Bell, Judge Carter, Officer Rivera, even Officer Hayes now. Sometimes it takes a whole community to fix something that's broken." Across the city, others were joining the fight. David Wilson gave his statement to the press, exposing the coercion behind the deleted footage. Former victims of Warren's quota system came forward, their stories filling Rachel's blog and local news reports. Hayes sat in his car outside the precinct, Rivera's words ringing in his ears. "We took an oath to protect and serve, not to destroy. Lives for bonuses." His hand hovered over his phone, Judge Carter's number ready to dial. One call would change everything. His career, his life, the entire system he'd been part of. In his chambers, Judge Carter reviewed the mounting evidence. The pattern was clear, the corruption undeniable. Tomorrow, he would issue an order that would shake the department to its foundations. But tonight, he said a prayer for all those whose lives had been damaged by Warren's corrupt machine. Monica stood at her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles. But tonight, she felt stronger than ever. The truth was emerging, justice was awakening, and change was coming. In the darkness of his office, Warren sat surrounded by shredded documents, his empire crumbling around him. But even as he destroyed evidence, more was being created. His own. Officers were turning against him, their conscience finally outweighing their fear. The web of corruption was unraveling, its threads pulled loose by the courage of those who dared to stand against it. Tomorrow would bring revelation and reckoning, but tonight, the truth gathered strength in the shadows, waiting for its moment to shine. Morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows as Monica straightened her borrowed suit jacket. Mrs. Green had insisted on lending it to her, along with a pair of sensible shoes that pinched her toes. "You look like what you are," the elderly woman had declared. "A respectable woman fighting for justice." The courtroom buzzed with tension. Community members filled the gallery, many wearing "Justice for Monica" buttons. Rachel's activists lined the back wall, notebooks ready. Reporters sketched quick portraits of the scene, their pens scratching against paper since cameras weren't allowed. Jason Bell arranged his files at the defense table, each document a piece of the puzzle they'd assembled. Monica sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel Warren's glare from across the room, where he sat with the prosecution team, his usual confidence now tinged with worry. Officer Hayes waited in the witness room, his testimony scheduled for the morning session. His hands trembled slightly as he reviewed his notes. The weight of his badge felt different now, a burden rather than an honor. Judge Carter entered, his robe swaying with each deliberate step. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The room fell silent, holding its collective breath. Assistant District Attorney Sheffield rose, his opening statement smooth as polished marble. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a simple case of theft and resisting arrest. The defendant, Monica Lewis, was caught attempting to leave Walker's grocery store with unpaid merchandise. When confronted by Officer Hayes, she became combative." "Objection." "Your Honor," Jason interrupted. "Counsel is testifying rather than providing an opening statement." "Sustained," Judge Carter ruled. "Mr. Sheffield, please restrict yourself to what you intend to prove." Sheffield adjusted his tie, momentarily thrown. The state will prove that Officer Hayes had probable cause to arrest Mrs. Lewis, that she resisted a lawful arrest, and that her claims of innocence are merely an attempt to avoid responsibility for her actions. When Jason stood to deliver his opening, his voice carried the weight of every document they'd uncovered, every witness who'd come forward. This case isn't about shoplifting. It's about a system that turns innocent people into criminals to meet quotas. We will prove that Mrs. Lewis was targeted, arrested, and prosecuted, not because she committed any crime, but because she was in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong skin color. Officer Hayes was the first witness called. He walked to the stand stiffly, avoiding Monica's eyes. After being sworn in, he faced Sheffield's questioning. Officer Hayes, please describe the events of the night in question. Hayes swallowed hard, looking at his hands. I received a call about a suspicious person at Walker's Grocery. The security guard, Tom Bradley, reported possible shoplifting in progress. And what did you observe when you arrived? Hayes paused, his rehearsed testimony dying in his throat. He looked at Monica, at her children sitting with Mrs. Green in the gallery, at Warren's threatening glare. I observed Mrs. Lewis leaving the store with grocery bags. Did she appear suspicious? No, sir. She appeared to be a mother finishing her shopping. Sheffield's eyes narrowed. Officer Hayes, isn't it true that she reached for something when you approached her? She tried to show me her receipt, Hayes replied, his voice growing stronger. She told me repeatedly that she had proof of purchase, but I didn't listen. I was more concerned with meeting quota, with making an arrest. Move to strike, Sheffield barked. Non-responsive. Overruled, Judge Carter interjected. The witness may explain his actions. Jason's cross-examination revealed the full truth. Hayes described the quota system, the pressure from Warren, the targeting of minority neighborhoods. His voice shook as he recounted how many lives he'd damaged in pursuit of advancement. Why are you telling us this now? Jason asked. Hayes looked directly at Monica for the first time. Because I can't lie anymore. Because what I did was wrong. Mrs. Lewis was innocent. The receipt was in her pocket. I arrested her because she fit the profile Warren told us to target, because I wanted to impress him, because I forgot why I became a police officer in the first place. During the lunch recess, Jason received an urgent text from Rachel. She'd obtained the recovered surveillance footage from David Wilson, showing Warren's visit to the store before Monica's arrest. The judge allowed it into evidence over Sheffield's strenuous objections. The footage played on the courtroom's monitors. The gathered crowd watched as Monica shopped carefully, paid for her groceries, and was subsequently arrested despite her attempts to show the receipt. More damning was the earlier footage of Warren speaking with Bradley, pointing out Monica when she entered the store. The state's case is built on racism and quotas, Jason argued. Mrs. Lewis wasn't arrested for committing a crime. She was arrested for being black in what Captain Warren designated as a target zone. Sheffield tried to salvage his case by attacking Monica's character. Isn't it true that you've had previous interactions with law enforcement? Yes, Monica answered calmly. I called them when my ex-husband became violent. I called them when someone broke into my neighbor's apartment. I called them because I believed they would help. Instead, they targeted me. Judge Carter's voice cut through Sheffield's next question. Counsel, if you continue this line of questioning without evidence of relevant prior convictions, you will be held in contempt. The afternoon brought Officer Rivera to the stand. She detailed the quota system's operation, supported by years of documented evidence. Her testimony painted a picture of systematic corruption, with Warren at its center. Officers who met quotas received cash bonuses, she explained. Those who questioned the system were punished with bad shifts, poor evaluations, or worse. Warren called it motivation, but it was pure corruption. Warren shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Rivera described his methods. His phone buzzed, constantly with messages from city officials, each one more panicked than the last, as the depth of his corruption became public. The jury sat transfixed as Jason presented chart after chart, showing the racial disparity in arrests, The numbers were stark. Minority residents were 5 times more likely to be arrested in Warren's precinct, with most cases ending in plea deals rather than trials. Mrs. Lewis refused to plead guilty to a crime she didn't commit, Jason reminded the jury. She stood up to a system designed to break her, and in doing so, she exposed the truth about police quotas, racial profiling, and the corruption that turns law enforcement into a tool of oppression. Monica's children watched from the gallery as their mother took the stand. Her voice never wavered as she described the night of her arrest, the humiliation of jail, the loss of her jobs, and the ongoing trauma suffered by her family. "I taught my children to trust the police," she testified. "I taught them that the law protects everyone equally. That night in the parking lot, they learned a different lesson. But now, they're learning a new one. That standing up for the truth matters, that justice is worth fighting for." Sheffield's cross-examination tried to focus on the minute details of that night, but Monica's answers remained consistent and clear. The receipt was still in evidence, date-stamped and itemized, proving her innocence beyond doubt. As the day's session drew to a close, Judge Carter addressed the court. "We'll resume tomorrow morning with closing arguments. I remind everyone that this case has implications beyond one arrest. The integrity of our justice system itself is on trial." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Rachel's activists chanted for justice while counter-protesters defended Warren. Monica walked through the chaos with her head high, her children's hands held tightly in hers. Hayes sat in his car long after the others had left, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His testimony had ended his career, but for the first time since the academy, he felt like a real police officer, one who protected truth rather than quotas. Warren huddled with his lawyers in a downtown office, their faces grim as they reviewed the day's testimony. The evidence against him was overwhelming, his carefully constructed system exposed to public scrutiny. In his chambers, Judge Carter studied Monica's file late into the evening. The case had grown far beyond a simple arrest, becoming a referendum on policing practices, racial bias, and institutional corruption. Monica tucked her children into bed that night, their prayers filled with hopes for justice. Marcus asked if Officer Hayes was good or bad now. "He's learning," Monica answered carefully. "Sometimes doing the right thing means admitting you did wrong first." Jason worked through the night, preparing his closing argument. The evidence filled boxes and hard drives, Hayes' testimony, Rivera's documents, Wilson's footage, the data, showing years of discriminatory arrests. Tomorrow, he would weave it all together into an undeniable picture of injustice and redemption. In homes across the city, people who'd been victimized by Warren's quota system watched the news coverage of the trial. Many cried as they recognized their own stories in Monica's testimony. Some called Jason's office, offering to testify about their experiences. The courthouse stood silent in the darkness, waiting for morning. Inside its walls, truth had begun to overcome corruption. Courage had faced down intimidation, and justice had awakened from a long slumber. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments and the jury's deliberation. The city held its breath, knowing that their future would be shaped by 12 citizens' response to Monica's stand against systemic corruption. Mrs. Green sat in her apartment, polishing her good shoes for tomorrow. "My Harold used to say that justice moves slow," she told her cat. "But it moves sure when good people push it along." The night deepened as Monica lay awake, remembering the weight of handcuffs, the sound of her children crying, the cold cell where she'd refused to surrender. Her truth. Tomorrow would determine more than her fate. It would show her children and the world whether courage and honesty could truly overcome corruption and prejudice. Morning light painted the courthouse steps gold as Jason Bell climbed them, carrying a heavy cardboard box. Inside were financial records obtained through Judge Carter's subpoena, years of precinct accounts showing mysterious payments, unauthorized bonuses, and carefully hidden incentives. The courtroom hummed with anticipation. Monica sat at the defense table, her posture straight despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Warren occupied his usual spot behind the prosecution, But his normal swagger had been replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Jason began by calling the precinct's former bookkeeper, Sarah Martinez, to the stand. Her hands shook as she opened the ledger she'd secretly copied before being forced into retirement. "Can you explain these monthly payments?" Jason asked, projecting a spreadsheet onto the courtroom screen. "They were labeled as performance incentives," Sarah explained. "But they only went to officers who met certain arrest quotas. Captain Warren insisted on cash payments off the books. When I questioned it, he said it was standard procedure." The jury leaned forward as Sarah detailed the payment system. Officers who exceeded their quotas received envelopes of cash. Those who failed found their overtime mysteriously denied, or their shifts changed to undesirable hours. "Did you maintain records of these payments?" "Yes." Sarah pulled out a thin notebook. "I kept a private log of every transaction. The amounts, the officers involved, the reasons given. I knew someday someone would ask questions." Sheffield objected repeatedly, but Judge Carter allowed the testimony. The financial web of corruption emerged with devastating clarity, a system designed to reward aggressive policing in targeted neighborhoods. Hayes returned to the stand, his testimony now focused on the incentive system. "Warren promised me fast advancement if I met the quotas. He said certain neighborhoods were target-rich environments. We all knew what that meant." "And how were officers compensated for meeting these quotas?" Jason asked. "Cash bonuses, usually. Between $500 and $2,000 depending on the number and type of arrests. Warren said it had to be cash to avoid bureaucratic interference. Now I know he meant oversight." During cross-examination, Sheffield tried to paint Hayes as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. "Isn't it true that you're only testifying against Captain Warren because you failed to meet department standards?" "No," Hayes replied firmly. "I'm testifying because I helped destroy innocent lives for money. Mrs. Lewis wasn't my first wrongful arrest, but she'll be my last." The afternoon brought David Wilson, the grocery store manager, to the stand. His voice trembled as he described Warren's visit before Monica's arrest. He said the store needed to cooperate with police initiatives. When I asked what that meant, he pointed out Mrs. Lewis entering the store. Said she fit the profile they were looking for. "And what happened to the surveillance footage?" Jason prompted. "2 officers came to my office the next day. Said it would be better for everyone if the footage disappeared. They watched while I deleted it." Wilson paused, gathering courage. "But I had already backed up the files. I couldn't sleep knowing an innocent woman might go to jail." The recovered footage played again, this time synced with security cameras from multiple angles. The jury watched Warren's arrival, his conversation with Bradley, Monica's normal shopping trip, and the aggressive arrest that followed. Officer Rivera took the stand next, armed with years of documented evidence. She described how Warren had built his corrupt empire, using quotas and financial incentives to turn police officers into profit generators. "The system targeted minority neighborhoods," she explained. Warren called them high-yield zones. Officers were encouraged to make arrests for minor infractions or on flimsy pretexts. The goal wasn't public safety. It was meeting quotas. Sheffield's cross-examination grew increasingly desperate. "Officer Rivera, isn't it possible these payments were legitimate performance bonuses?" "No." Rivera's voice was firm. "They were. Bribes to violate people's rights. We arrested innocent people like Mrs. Lewis because it meant extra money in our pockets. Warren created a system that turned police officers into predators. The evidence mounted as Jason introduced internal emails, text messages, and departmental memos. Warren had carefully built his quota system over years, insulating himself with layers of deniability while pressuring officers to generate arrests." Monica watched from the defense table as her case expanded beyond her own arrest. Each witness revealed new depths of corruption, new layers of systemic abuse. Her children sat in the gallery with Mrs. Green, their young faces solemn as they absorbed the proceedings. During a brief recess, Jason received an urgent call from Rachel. Her network had uncovered financial connections between Warren and city officials, including campaign contributions linked to arrest statistics. Warren wasn't just corrupting the police department, Jason told Monica. He was selling aggressive, Policing as a political tool. More arrests meant more funding, more power, more influence. Back in session, Jason called an unexpected witness, former officer Michael Thompson, who'd been forced out of the department 3 years earlier after questioning Warren's methods. "I reported the quota system to Internal Affairs," Thompson testified. 2 days later, Warren called me into his office, said if I pursued the complaint, certain incidents from my past would come to light. When I refused to back down, those incidents were mysteriously discovered. I was given a choice: retire quietly or face investigation. The jury listened intently as Thompson described how Warren had systematically removed officers who questioned his methods while promoting those who embraced them. The pattern was clear: a deliberate transformation of law enforcement into a profit-driven enterprise built on racial profiling and false arrests. Warren's face grew increasingly pale as his carefully constructed system was exposed. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from political allies desperately trying to distance themselves from the growing scandal. During another recess, Monica overheard 2 jurors talking in the hallway. "It's not just about one wrongful arrest anymore," one whispered. "The whole system is corrupt." Jason's next witness was a forensic accountant who'd analyzed the precinct's finances. Using complex charts and graphs, she demonstrated how arrest quotas correlated with budget increases, political donations, and officer promotions. "The data shows a clear pattern," she explained. "Neighborhoods with primarily minority residents were targeted for increased arrests. These arrests generated fines, fees, and forfeitures that funded both the quota bonuses and political contributions." Sheffield attempted to object, but Judge Carter allowed the testimony. "The financial motivation behind Mrs. Lewis's arrest is directly relevant to this case," he ruled. As the day progressed, more victims of Warren's quota system filled the gallery. Their presence served as silent testimony to the human cost of corruption. Lives derailed by false arrests, families torn apart by coerced plea deals, communities devastated by aggressive policing. Hayes watched from his seat as the full scope of his former captain's corruption emerged. The cash bonuses that had once seemed like rewards for good policing now felt like blood money. During the afternoon session, Jason introduced evidence of Warren's attempts to cover his tracks. Deleted emails recovered by computer forensics experts showed frantic messages ordering subordinates to shred documents and wipe hard drives. Captain Warren knew his system was illegal, Jason told the jury. That's why he insisted on cash payments. That's why he destroyed evidence. That's why he threatened anyone who questioned his methods. Monica's testimony took on new significance as the final witness of the day. She described how Warren's quota system had nearly destroyed her family. The jobs lost, the reputation damaged, the trauma inflicted on her children. "I wasn't arrested because I committed a crime," she said clearly. "I was arrested because I was worth money to them. My children watched their mother being handcuffed because Captain Warren needed to meet his quotas." Sheffield had no questions on cross-examination. The evidence was too overwhelming, the corruption too blatant to explain away. As court adjourned for the day, Judge Carter made an unprecedented announcement. "In light of today's testimony, I am referring this matter to the FBI for investigation of civil rights violations and criminal corruption." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps as Rachel led protesters in chants for justice. Warren slipped out a side door, his lawyer shielding him from cameras while refusing to comment. Monica walked to Mrs. Green's car with her head held high, her children close beside her. The elderly woman had tears in her eyes as she hugged them, all. "Truth always rises," she said softly, "like cream to the top of milk. Might take time, but it always rises." That evening, Jason worked late in his office, preparing for the next day's proceedings. The evidence boxes surrounding him told a story of systemic corruption, of power abused and justice perverted. But they also told a story of courage, of people like Monica who refused to be broken, of officers like Rivera who chose truth over security, of citizens who stood together against injustice. Hayes sat in his apartment, his badge and gun on the coffee table. His testimony had ended his police career, but for the first time since the academy, He felt clean. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more evidence of corruption, more proof that the system he'd once believed in had been twisted into a tool of oppression. Warren paced in his darkened office, shredding documents even as he knew it was too late. His empire of quotas and kickbacks was crumbling, exposed by the very people he'd tried to break. Monica tucked her children into bed, their prayers now including thanks for truth and justice alongside their usual requests. Marcus asked if things would be different now. "Yes, baby," she answered, smoothing his hair. "Sometimes things have to break completely before they can be fixed properly. What happened to us was wrong, but it's helping to fix something bigger than us." The city slept uneasily, knowing that tomorrow would bring more revelations, more evidence of how trust had been betrayed and power corrupted. But in that darkness, hope was growing. Hope that truth could overcome corruption, that justice could be restored. That change was finally coming. Monica's hands trembled as she straightened her blouse. The morning sun filtered through her apartment window, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, she could hear news vans already gathering, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. "You ready, Mama?" Marcus asked, his school uniform neat and pressed. Lily stood beside him, clutching the lucky charm bracelet Mrs. Green had given her. "Ready as I'll ever be, baby." Monica hugged them both, breathing in their familiar scents, drawing strength from their presence. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation. The jury had deliberated for 3 days, each hour feeling like an eternity to Monica. As she walked through the security checkpoint, familiar faces nodded in support. Courthouse staff who'd watched the trial unfold, activists who'd stood vigil outside, other victims of Warren's quota system who'd come forward. Jason met them at the courtroom doors, his tie slightly crooked from a sleepless night. "Whatever happens," he whispered to Monica, "you've already won. The truth is out." Inside, the gallery filled quickly. Rachel's activists occupied one side, their Justice for Monica buttons catching the fluorescent light. On the other side sat police officers, some supporting Warren, others there to witness justice. Officer Rivera sat directly behind Monica, her presence a silent reminder of the courage it took to break the blue wall of silence. Warren arrived flanked by lawyers, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed fear. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Years of financial records, witness testimonies, recovered documents, and surveillance footage painting a damning picture of systematic corruption. Judge Carter entered, his robe sweeping behind him. The room fell silent as the bailiff called out, "All rise! Court is now in session. Bring in the jury," Carter ordered, his voice carrying the weight of justice about to be served. 12 faces filed in, avoiding eye contact with both Monica and Warren. The foreperson, a middle-aged teacher, handed a folded paper to the bailiff, who delivered it to Judge Carter. "In the matter of State versus Monica Lewis on the charge of shoplifting, how do you find?" The foreperson stood. "Not guilty." Monica's children grabbed Mrs. Green's hands tightly as tears began flowing freely in the gallery. "On the charge of resisting arrest?" "Not guilty." Relief flooded through Monica's body as Jason squeezed her shoulder. But Judge Carter wasn't finished. "Given the evidence presented during this trial, I am taking the extraordinary step of ordering the immediate arrest of Captain James Warren on charges of corruption, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice." The courtroom erupted as federal marshals moved toward Warren. His face turned ashen as handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the same sound that had haunted Monica's nightmares. "You can't do this," Warren sputtered. "I was maintaining order, following department policies." "The policies were corrupt," Judge Carter responded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "And you were their architect." Officer Hayes approached the bench. Hayes walked forward, his shoulders straight despite the weight of his actions. "Yes, Your Honor. You are hereby remanded into federal custody pending charges of perjury, false arrest, and conspiracy. Your cooperation will be noted at sentencing." As Hayes was led away, he paused near Monica. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "What I did to you and your family." I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Monica nodded, understanding that redemption often begins with acknowledgement of wrong. Judge Carter continued, his voice resonating with authority. This case has exposed a cancer within our justice system, a system of quotas that turn police officers into predators, targeting minority communities for profit. This ends today. He turned to Monica. Mrs. Lewis, on behalf of the court, I offer our deepest apologies for the injustice you've endured. Your courage in fighting this corrupt system has opened the door for reform. Rachel's activists erupted in cheers as Monica hugged her children, their small bodies trembling with emotion. Mrs. Green wiped tears from her eyes, whispering prayers of thanksgiving. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward Monica. How does it feel to be vindicated? She gathered her thoughts, remembering all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if justice would prevail. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been wrongly arrested, every family traumatized by corrupt police practices. Today shows that truth can overcome injustice if we're brave enough to stand for it. Jason announced plans to file a civil lawsuit against the city. The quota system didn't just hurt Monica, it damaged countless lives. We'll ensure every victim receives compensation and that systemic changes are implemented. Rachel's network had already begun documenting other cases, creating a database of lives affected by Warren's corruption. Her latest blog post went viral, detailing the human cost of quota-based policing and demanding comprehensive reform. The mayor held an emergency press conference, desperately trying to distance himself from the scandal. I am shocked and appalled by these revelations. We will cooperate fully with federal investigators and implement immediate reforms. But Rachel's research had already exposed connections between City Hall and Warren's corrupt practices. Campaign contributions tied to arrest statistics, emails discussing productivity metrics, evidence that the mayor's office had ignored complaints about quota-based policing. Federal investigators descended on the precinct, seizing computers and documents. Officers who had participated in Warren's system began coming forward, hoping to avoid prosecution by cooperating. Monica walked down the courthouse steps, holding her children's hands. The morning sun felt warmer somehow. The air, cleaner. Mrs. Green waited by her car, ready to drive them home. What happens now, Mama? Lily asked, her voice small but hopeful. Now we heal, baby, and we help others heal too. Sometimes good things come from bad situations if we're brave enough to stand up for what's right. That evening, Monica's apartment, filled with supporters celebrating the verdict. Rachel brought food from local restaurants that had followed the trial. Jason discussed plans for the civil suit while Mrs. Green entertained the children with stories. Officer Rivera arrived late, having spent the day helping federal investigators. They're finding more evidence every hour, she reported. Warren's corruption went deeper than anyone imagined. The next morning's headlines told the story. Justice prevails. Corrupt police captain arrested. Quota system exposed. Calls for reform grow. Mother's courage breaks blue wall of silence. Monica sat at her kitchen table, reading messages from other victims of Warren's system. Each story echoed her own. False arrests, coerced pleas, lives disrupted by quotas and corruption. But now they had hope, a path to justice opened by her refusal to accept injustice. In his jail cell, Warren faced the consequences of his actions. His empire of quotas and kickbacks had crumbled, exposed by the very people he'd tried to victimize. The sound of cell doors closing reminded him of all the innocent people he'd sent behind bars. Hayes sat in federal custody, writing a detailed confession of every wrongful arrest he'd made under Warren's system. Each name represented a life he'd helped damage, a wrong he needed to right. Judge Carter worked late into the night, drafting orders for systemic reforms. The quota system hadn't just corrupted one precinct, it had infected the entire concept of justice. Change would require more than arrests and convictions. It would demand a complete reimagining of law enforcement. Rachel's activists gathered outside the precinct, their signs now calling for specific reforms. End arrest quotas. Community oversight now. Police for justice, not profit. The federal investigation expanded, following trails of corruption through City Hall and beyond. Each document revealed new connections, new compromises, new betrayals of public trust. Monica tucked her children into bed that night, their prayers filled with gratitude for justice served. Marcus asked if everything would be different now. Change takes time, she answered truthfully. But today showed that it's possible when people stand together for what's right. In homes across the city, families watched news coverage of the verdict. Parents held their children closer, remembering Monica's courage. Communities began organizing, determined to ensure that quotas and corruption would never again masquerade as law enforcement. Mrs. Green sat in her apartment, smiling as she watched the evening news. Harold would be proud, she told her cat. Justice moved slow, but it moved sure. The night deepened as the city processed the day's events. In the darkness, hope bloomed like flowers through concrete. Hope for reform, for healing, for a justice system worthy of its name. Monica stood at her window, watching the city lights flicker. The verdict had changed more than her life. It had cracked the foundation of systemic corruption. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she could rest, knowing that truth had prevailed, that courage had been rewarded, that justice was possible even in the darkest times. The stars shone down on a city transformed by one mother's refusal to accept injustice. In precincts across town, officers contemplated their own roles in maintaining or challenging corrupt systems. In community centers, activists planned next steps in the fight for reform. In homes touched by quota-based policing, families began to hope for healing and restitution. Summer air carried the sounds of the city. Traffic, distant sirens, children playing in spite of everything. Monica closed her window, knowing that tomorrow would bring new battles for justice. But tonight, truth had won. Tonight, courage had triumphed. Tonight, hope lived again. Autumn leaves scattered across the courthouse steps as Warren and Hayes entered for their sentencing hearing. 3 months had passed since Monica's vindication, months filled with federal investigations, plea deals, and a steady stream of revelations about the depth of corruption within the police department. Warren's trial had been brief but devastating. Former officers testified about his quota system, financial experts traced millions in illegal payments, and community members shared stories of lives destroyed by wrongful arrests. The evidence left no room for doubt. Judge Carter's courtroom was packed as he prepared to deliver the sentences. Monica sat in the gallery between Mrs. Green and Jason, watching the men who had nearly destroyed her life face accountability. James Warren, Judge Carter began, his voice heavy with authority. You transformed law enforcement into a profit-driven enterprise that targeted minority communities. You corrupted officers under your command, betrayed public trust, and caused untold harm to innocent citizens. Warren stood rigid, his former arrogance replaced by defeated resignation. The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, without possibility of early release. Additionally, you are ordered to make restitution to all victims of your quota system. As Warren was led away, Hayes stepped forward. His cooperation with investigators had revealed crucial evidence, but accountability couldn't be avoided. Officer Hayes, Carter continued, your cooperation is noted, as is your evident remorse. However, you participated in numerous wrongful arrests, knowing they were unjust. The court sentences you to 5 years, with eligibility for parole after 3. Hayes nodded, accepting his punishment. Before being escorted out, he turned to Monica. I'll spend every day trying to make amends. Outside, Rachel's activists celebrated the sentences with signs reading, Accountability Matters and Justice Served. The crowd included many of Warren's victims, their faces reflecting a complex mix of vindication and lingering pain. The city council chambers overflowed during a special session to address police reform. Monica testified about her experience, her voice steady as she described the human cost of quota-based policing. This isn't about punishing police, she explained. It's about creating a system that truly serves and protects everyone equally. The council passed a comprehensive reform package, including elimination of all arrest quotas, mandatory body cameras, independent oversight committee, community policing initiatives, regular audit of arrest patterns, enhanced training on racial bias, JASONs. Civil lawsuit against the city reached a historic settlement. Monica received substantial compensation, but more importantly, the agreement mandated systemic changes in law enforcement practices. The settlement isn't just about money, Jason announced to reporters. It's about ensuring this never happens again. The funds allowed Monica to move her family to a better neighborhood and start a small business. But she didn't stop fighting for change. With Rachel's help, she established a foundation to support victims of wrongful arrests and advocate for police reform. The Foundation for Police Accountability works to bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities, Monica explained during the opening ceremony. We believe in justice that serves everyone. Officer Rivera played a crucial role in rebuilding trust between police and citizens. Her testimony had helped dismantle Warren's corrupt system, and now she led training sessions on ethical policing. We took an oath to protect and serve, she reminded fellow officers. That means standing against corruption, even when it wears a badge. The precinct underwent a complete reorganization. Many officers resigned or faced charges, but others embraced the chance for reform. New leadership emphasized community engagement over arrest numbers, and civilian oversight ensured transparency. Hayes wrote letters from prison, documenting his journey from ambitious rookie to corrupt officer to reluctant whistleblower. His written confession became required reading at the police academy, a cautionary tale about the importance of moral courage. In schools across the city, Marcus and Lily found themselves treated differently. Some saw them as heroes' children, others as troublemakers who had exposed police corruption. Their teachers noticed both children showing unusual maturity in discussions about justice and fairness. My mama taught us that standing up for truth is hard, Marcus explained during a class presentation. But staying silent hurts more. Warren's prosecution triggered investigations in other cities, revealing similar quota systems nationwide. Police departments faced increased scrutiny, and reform movements gained momentum across the country. Monica's story became a catalyst for change. She traveled to speaking engagements, sharing her experience with community groups, law enforcement agencies, and civil rights organizations. Change starts with one person refusing to accept injustice, she would say. But it takes an entire community to transform that refusal into reform. The mayor resigned amid revelations about his knowledge of Warren's corrupt practices. His replacement, a former civil rights attorney, prioritized rebuilding trust between city government and minority communities. Judge Carter's reputation for integrity grew. His handling of Monica's case and the subsequent corruption trials set precedents for judicial courage in confronting systemic injustice. The law must serve justice, he wrote in a widely cited opinion, not quotas, not politics, not prejudice. Mrs. Green watched these changes unfold with satisfaction. Her apartment became a gathering place for community organizers, her wisdom helping guide the ongoing fight for reform. Progress isn't just about changing laws, she often said. It's about changing hearts and minds. 1 year after Warren's arrest, the city gathered for a memorial service honoring victims of quota-based policing. Families shared stories of loved ones imprisoned, lives derailed, trust shattered. But they also spoke of healing, of communities, united in demanding change. Monica stood at the podium, her children beside her, addressing the gathered crowd. A year ago, I was just a mother trying to feed her children. Today, we're all part of something larger, a movement to ensure justice serves everyone equally. The Foundation's work expanded, offering legal aid, counseling, and advocacy support to families affected by police misconduct. Each case represented another chance to transform pain into progress. Hayes watched news coverage of these changes from his prison cell, writing detailed accounts of how Warren's system had corrupted the department. His testimonies helped other cities identify and eliminate similar quota practices. Rachel's network of activists grew into a powerful force for accountability, monitoring police practices and advocating for continued reform. Their documentation of cases helped prevent backsliding into old patterns. Officer Rivera developed new training programs emphasizing ethical decision-making and community engagement. Young officers learned to measure success by lives improved, rather than arrests made. The precinct's transformation became a model for departments nationwide. Visitor groups toured the facilities, learning about community policing initiatives and civilian oversight mechanisms. Marcus excelled in school, his experiences fueling an interest in law and justice. Teachers noted his thoughtful contributions to discussions about civil rights and social change. Lily's nightmares about the arrest gradually faded, replaced by pride in her mother's courage. She started a student group promoting understanding between youth and law enforcement. Monica's small business thrived, becoming a gathering place for community members and reform advocates. The walls displayed newspaper articles about the case, alongside artwork created by local children. The foundation established scholarships for children of incarcerated parents, helping break cycles of poverty and trauma. Each recipient represented hope for a more just future. Warren served his sentence in a federal facility, his empire of corruption dismantled, his legacy transformed from respected captain to cautionary tale about abuse of power. One evening, Monica found Marcus studying the framed newspaper article about Warren's sentencing. "Do you think he understands now?" he asked. "What he did to people?" "I hope so," Monica answered thoughtfully. "But what matters more is that we understand how to prevent it from happening again, how to stand up for what's right, how to change things that are wrong." The city had changed irrevocably. Trust was being rebuilt, not through speeches and promises, but through consistent action and accountability. Each reformed policy, each civilian oversight meeting, each community policing initiative represented another step toward justice. As autumn deepened into winter, Monica stood at her business's window, watching leaves dance in the wind. The Foundation's latest report showed significant decreases in wrongful arrests and improved police-community relations. "Progress isn't perfect," she told a documentary filmmaker interviewing her about the changes. "But it's real. Every person who speaks up, every officer who chooses integrity over quotas, every judge who demands accountability, they're all part of the solution." The story of one mother's fight for justice had sparked a movement, challenging systemic corruption and demanding change. In precincts, courtrooms, and communities across the nation, people were learning the lesson Monica had taught her children: that standing up for truth might be difficult, but silence in the face of injustice was no longer an option. 5 years. After her wrongful arrest, Monica Lewis stood before a packed auditorium at the National Civil Rights Conference. Her memoir, Standing for Truth, had topped bestseller lists for months, its powerful message resonating with readers across the country. "Change doesn't happen in grand moments," she told the attentive crowd. "It happens in small choices, in everyday courage, in refusing to accept injustice as normal." My story began with a grocery store receipt, but it became about something much larger: the courage to stand up when systems fail us. In the front row, Marcus and Lily, now teenagers, watched their mother with pride. Marcus had just started college, majoring in law, with dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney like Jason Bell. Lily, a high school junior, led her school's social justice club and mentored children affected by police misconduct. Judge Carter sat nearby, his recent retirement allowing more time for advocacy work. His final years on the bench had established precedents for police accountability nationwide. Today, he would introduce Monica's keynote address about transforming law enforcement. "Mrs. Lewis didn't just win a case," he told the audience. "She sparked a movement that changed how we think about justice, accountability, and community policing." The Police Accountability Foundation, which Monica had established with her settlement money, now had offices in 12 cities. Their work had helped overturn hundreds of wrongful convictions and implement reform measures in police departments across the country. Jason Bell, still passionate despite his graying hair, headed the foundation's legal team. His office walls displayed framed newspaper articles about successful cases, each representing another life restored, another injustice corrected. Monica taught us all about courage, he often told new lawyers joining the foundation. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet courage of standing firm when everything seems stacked against you. Officer Rivera had risen to become the city's first female police chief, implementing training programs that became national models for ethical policing. Her emphasis on community engagement and accountability had transformed the department's culture. "We measure success differently now," she explained during a training session. "Not by arrest numbers, but by trust built, problem solved, communities served." The former precinct building had been converted into a community center, its walls adorned with murals celebrating unity and justice. Weekly meetings brought together police officers and community members for dialogue and problem solving. Mrs. Green, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, ran a youth mentoring program at the center. Her apartment remained a gathering place for activists and organizers, her wisdom helping guide new generations in the fight for justice. "Change is like bread rising," she would say, serving her famous sweet potato pie. "It needs time, warmth, and people working together." Hayes had served his sentence, using his time to document the evolution of Warren's corrupt system. His written accounts helped other departments identify and eliminate similar practices. Upon release, he joined the Foundation's speaking circuit, sharing his journey from corruption to redemption. "I can't undo the harm I caused," he told audiences. "But I can help prevent others from making the same mistakes." Warren remained in federal prison, his appeals exhausted. The system he'd built had been dismantled, its corrupt practices exposed and eliminated. His name became synonymous with abuse of power, studied in law schools as a cautionary tale. Monica's memoir detailed not just her case, but the larger story of community resilience and systemic change. Publishers had doubted its appeal, but readers responded to its message of hope and transformation. The book's success brought interview requests and speaking engagements, platforms Monica used to advocate for continued reform. She appeared on national news programs, testified before Congress, and consulted with police departments implementing changes. "The work isn't finished," she reminded audiences, "but we've proven that change is possible when communities unite and demand better." Marcus thrived in college, his childhood experiences fueling a passionate commitment to civil rights law. His professors noted his unique perspective on justice, shaped by watching his mother's fight for accountability. "Law isn't just about rules," he wrote in a class essay. "It's about protecting human dignity and ensuring equal justice. I learned that watching my mother stand up to a corrupt system." Lily's school activism earned national recognition. She organized conferences bringing together police officers and young people, creating dialogue where there had been fear and mistrust. "Mom taught us that change starts with understanding each other," she explained during a television interview. "We can't fix problems if we don't talk about them honestly." The Foundation's latest initiative focused on preventive measures, working with police academies to screen out candidates with authoritarian tendencies and strengthen ethical training. Research showed promising results in departments that adopted their recommendations. Rachel's grassroots network had evolved into a powerful advocacy organization, monitoring police practices and pushing for transparency. Their documentation methods developed during Monica's case became standard tools for accountability activists nationwide. "Monica showed us that one person's story can change the system," Rachel told new organizers. "But it takes all of us working together to make that change last." The city itself had transformed. Community policing replaced aggressive enforcement, civilian oversight, ensured transparency, and regular dialogue sessions built trust between officers and residents. Monica's small business had grown into a successful restaurant, its walls displaying artwork from local children alongside newspaper articles about police reform. It became a gathering place for activists, officers, and community members working together for change. One evening, as she closed the restaurant, Monica found Hayes waiting outside. He'd completed his speaking tour and wanted to thank her before moving to another city to start fresh. "Your courage changed more than just the system," he said quietly. "It changed people like me." made us face what we'd become and choose a different path. The community center hosted regular meetings between police officers and local youth, breaking down barriers and building understanding. Officers learned to see the humanity in the communities they served, while young people discovered that badges didn't have to mean fear. Monica's calendar filled with speaking engagements, but she always made time for local groups starting their own reform initiatives. Her story encouraged others to stand up, speak out, and demand accountability. Change isn't something that happens to us, she told a group of community organizers. It's something we create together, choice by choice, day by day. The Foundation's scholarship program had grown, supporting education for children affected by police misconduct. Each recipient represented hope for a more just future, their success stories adding to the growing evidence that change was possible. Judge Carter's judicial philosophy influenced a new generation of judges, encouraging them to prioritize justice over procedure and recognize systemic barriers to equality. "The law must serve humanity," he wrote in his memoir, "not the other way around." Rivera's police department became a national model, hosting officers from other cities eager to learn about community-oriented policing. Their success proved that effective law enforcement didn't require quotas or aggressive tactics. The former precinct's community center hosted an anniversary celebration, marking 5 years of transformation. Residents shared stories of positive police interactions, of problems solved through dialogue, of trust slowly rebuilt. Monica watched her children grow into passionate advocates for justice, their childhood trauma transformed into purpose. Marcus's legal studies and Lily's activism represented hope for continuing progress. "You turned pain into purpose," Mrs. Green told her over tea. "That's the greatest victory of all." The national movement for police reform gained momentum, inspired by Monica's example of persistent, principled resistance to injustice. Other communities used her story as a blueprint for their own struggles. As Monica prepared to conclude her keynote speech, she looked out at the assembled crowd. Activists, officers, officials, and ordinary citizens united in the pursuit of justice. "5 years ago, I stood alone in a parking lot facing a system designed to break me. Today, we stand together, building something better. My story isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what happens when we refuse to accept injustice, when we stand together for change, when we believe in the possibility of a better system." The applause that followed carried the weight of lives transformed, of systems reformed, of communities healed. Monica's journey from wrongful arrest to national advocate had opened doors for countless others to demand and create change. Outside the auditorium, autumn leaves danced in the sigh breeze as Monica hugged her children close. Their future held challenges, but also hope. Hope born from the courage to stand for truth, the power of unity, and the persistent belief that justice was worth fighting for. What would you do if you faced a system designed to break you? Would you have Monica's courage to stand and fight? If this story moved you, give it a like. Subscribe for more powerful tales of ordinary people standing up to extraordinary injustice. And remember, sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage. Share this video if you believe in the power of one person to make a difference. Together, we can ensure stories like Monica's continue to inspire change.